Okay, so boundaries apply to our bodies, yes, to our spaces, but maybe with these liminal spaces like hallways and driveways, the place you take off
Yeah,
your shoes, the corridor, the reception area in a business.
yeah,
There's these sort of liminal spaces that are sort of where boundaries are met. And we find those places interesting, like borders and boundaries, right? And then it's like what we own. And then another one I think people underestimate is time.
yeah,
So this is what a lot of my clients don't realize, like your time is your business, right? Like your time is your business. Like you don't get to take my time. And you've seen what I'm like if people send me 4-minute voice notes.
I have.
They generally don't twice. Because like if I send someone a 4-minute voice note, I'm saying I demand your time, right?
Yeah,
I demand your time. I'm like, no, you don't get to take my time. That's mine. Right? If someone wants to speak to me, I remember once I would talk to when I was young. I'd stop a girl maybe in the street in the park and try and talk to her, and then she didn't want to talk to me. I just had to accept. You know what? She doesn't. I don't have a right to talk to her. This is her time. Maybe she's not in the mood. Maybe she just doesn't like me. Maybe she's boyfriend. Maybe she's gay. Maybe I don't fucking ever know why. I don't have to know why, and she doesn't have to justify it. Now, I think maybe the sort of exception there, I'd say, is like civility. I remember trying to talk to Russian girls in Moscow, and they just ignore me and walk around me. And I'd say, okay, you could acknowledge my existence. Like someone was just trying to sell me the Slovenian equivalent of the Big Issue. I don't owe him my time, but I think I owe him a certain amount of civility, let's say, and just to say no,
yeah,
thank you, right?
yeah. What is the boundary, why it matters, and how it's managed? How the
Right,
boundary is managed.
right. So this is where we get to the over and under. One of the things I do in body coaching with is a scale of no. Yeah, so the first insight is that cognitively knowing to say no isn't enough. If people can't embody a no, then they can't do it. Yeah, and often the reason they won't do no is because they only have a very hard no. So I'll do it's like, no, thank you. No, definitely not. And eventually we get onto the fabled fuck you warrior pose that we use from embodiment, which is like actually having a really fierce boundary. But what I notice is sometimes people swing, they go from no boundaries to over boundaried. There's like a sort
Yeah,
of pendulum kind of effect. And I mean, the sort of the aggressive feminist is the classic here, right? And it's someone who maybe has been hurt by having their boundaries violated. And one definition of trauma actually is having being under or over boundaried is either someone who's stuck in yes and they're a people pleaser, they're super
yeah,
agreeable, or and for some reason now that's a popular topic. Like I wrote a book on people pleasing. It's easier to admit than the alternative because the alternative is basically you're a bit of a bitch. You're a bit of an asshole, right? The alternative is I'm a bit harsh with people. Like I tell people to go fuck themselves when I could just say no, thank you, right? Like that's the other that problem exists, and people don't want to sign up for that course. I notice because it's much harder to admit to.
yeah. People readily admit to being a people pleaser, but that's without really understanding what's under being a people pleaser, isn't it?
What's under it? I mean, I wrote a book on it, but let's hear your take. What's under it? What's under it, Helen?
Manipulation, and lack of authenticity. Those are things, the qualities that people tend not to aspire to.
Yeah, no one would say I like to manipulate people with fake kindness, right? Like, where they say I'm a people pleaser, and it's way better PR. Actually, I spoke to someone in publishing, and he said there's the secret to a good book in personal growth is to take something that a lot of people do and make it sound good and tell people it's not their fault, right? My friend of mine, actually, Alex, if you're out there, I'm taking the piss out of you. He literally wrote a book called "It's Not Your Fault," and I always say it's not your fault, but it is your responsibility, right?
Yeah,
So it's like actually taking responsibility for your own boundaries. And I give you an example of this. Like, didn't when I was younger, I was used to feisty Irish women who would just tell you to bugger off if they didn't want something. And I just assumed all women were like that. So when I started dating, I didn't realize like most English women are like super agreeable. And you can say this comes from trauma or patriarchy or whatever. They would pretend things were okay. And then later on, I'd get a text message from them or their friend would tell me and say, hey, why did you do that? Or what? I was like, what? I didn't know there was a problem. And one thing, if you're disagreeable like me, is don't underestimate how good at masking people pleasers are. Like, don't
yes,
underestimate how good at pretending everything's fine is for people who, and sympathetically may have had traumatic experiences. They may have had societal conditioning, gender conditioning. But I was shook because, like, people in my family aren't like that. Like my sister will tell you to bugger off if if you do something she doesn't like. So I was like absolutely shocked when I realized there was a whole group of people who not only couldn't say no, but hid the fact, hid it, and maybe even didn't know themselves. Because actually, we tend to think of the skill of boundaries as
Yes.
saying no, but there's a previous skill. I actually say there's two skills. The first skill is noticing when something's not okay.
Yes.
And the second skill is saying no. And it's like, and their first skill is an awareness skill. It's a body awareness skill. So if people are numb, dissociated, they don't always have it. Like, and like notice when there's that. You hear people now say, "I don't feel comfortable with that," which I fucking hate. What does that mean? Okay, if it means no, thank you, that's totally fine. But it's like again, boundary has to be about you. Like someone said to me, "I'm not comfortable with what you're saying." I'm like, "Cool, you're not saying it. Don't worry about it." Like, I don't care. Like, you're not comfortable with it, right? Right. Oh, but are we talk? This is where boundaries has to be about you. Like, this is where I hear some people say that's my boundary, but they're really asking you to do something. This is a bit like human rights. If somebody says you have a human right to food, that sounds good, right? That sounds reasonable. Because somebody has to grow the food. Someone has to provide the food. So you can only have a human right from something like from violence, from attack, from theft. You have a human right to your food, to not have your food stolen, right? Because that's yours.
Yeah.
But you can't have a human right for housing because someone's got to build the bloody house. So it's just this sort of flip side of the coin. You can't say, well, that's my boundary, so you have to do it. No, I fucking don't.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
my business, what I do. Now, the only time my business becomes your business is if I'm taking your stuff, violating your body. I can't touch you. I can't steal from you. I can't hurt from you. Because it almost defines liberalism in the best possible sense of our ethical system is defined by this, right? Like your rights ended my body.
Yes.
Right? You have no rights over
Yes.
my body, over my time, over my stuff. Right. And that's why like full libertarians, they dislike taxation. Because that's taking your stuff. That's all it is, right? It's like someone forcing you to give your stuff up. So yeah, I think this is the interesting debate. And certainly like this is why we're boundaries. I'd always ask, are we actually talking about a boundary? Or do you want something from me? Because that's different.
Yeah, different relationships to boundaries. As you're talking there, I'm thinking that many and women, I think, particularly, many have developed a pattern of saying yes
Yeah.
before they've developed the awareness.
What's
So
the
no
default pattern,
awareness.
right? What's
Yeah,
the default? Is
just
it default no, like the hotel staff, or is it the
yeah,
default yes, which
yeah,
is pretty gendered? Why do you think? I mean, you tell me better than me, but I've known certain cultures do that more than others, for sure. I was in Bali, for example, it's super agreeable. Have to be careful with my Indian employees because they'll say yes even when they don't have capacity for something. Yeah. I mean, this is the issue with boundaries. Like, if we don't have boundaries, we get exhausted, we get resentful. That's the other big
yeah,
cost. Probably should have talked about this earlier, but if you don't have boundaries, what happens? It's like, here's another one. Ethically, you allow violation. So I would
yes,
say not having boundaries is an ethical problem, right? Like when the girl says, "Oh, tried to kiss me and I didn't want that," I'm like, "Hang on a minute, I had no idea." Like who's responsible here? Well, you could say me for not being calibrated, and there's some truth in that. We can't just grab people or whatever, right? But it's like it's also up for the other person to say something, and I worry for young guys, for example, dating today. I mean, luckily I don't have this issue anymore, but I worry for young guys because it's like if all it takes for something to be a boundary violation is for something to be attempted and not wanted, well, I have no idea, right? Like if I tried to kiss my girlfriend and she says I didn't want that, is that a boundary violation?
yeah.
Surely there must be some communication of the boundary, right? I mean,
Yeah, and
within reason limits.
the relationship matters, doesn't it? The relationship matters. I know that I have a ready no for somebody on the doorstep that rings the doorbell and wants to sell me something. My
Right,
no
right,
is
right.
there before I've even heard
Of
what they're
course.
selling.
And no one
Yeah,
likes to be treated as an object, whether it's being
yeah,
sold to or in intimacy terms. Like this idea of you can feel it, right? Like you can
yeah,
feel if a salesperson just wants to get something from you or a creepy person on a date. It
yeah,
doesn't feel good. And the boundary, I think, rightly comes up at that point.
yes.